Maria sat on the edge of her small wooden bed, staring at the letter that had changed the direction of her life. The paper was thin and slightly wrinkled from how many times she had opened and closed it. She did not need to read it again to remember the words. They were already carved into her heart. The man who had promised to marry her through a mail-order arrangement had written, "Only one cold sentence. I cannot accept you because you are too big." A simple line. Yet it carried the weight of years of judgment she had faced. She was a woman in her late 20s, strong in body and gentle in heart. Her size had always been the reason people mistreated her. It was not because she was unhealthy or unable to do things. She could lift water buckets, carry sacks of grain, and do all kinds of work that required strength. But people still whispered, still stared, and still made her feel small, even though she was physically large. She had hoped the mail-order marriage would offer her a new beginning. She had read stories of other women who found honest, hard-working husbands through such arrangements, especially in remote towns where men were many and women were few. She imagined living a peaceful life somewhere quiet, somewhere she was not constantly judged. She dreamed of being respected and maybe one day even loved. But the rejection letter made all those dreams crumble. Still, Maria was not someone who allowed life to defeat her easily. She had been disappointed before, but every time she stood up again, this time she felt a deep ache, but she did not let it stop her plans. She had already sold her small belongings, prepared her travel bag, and bought a train ticket to the far northern region. She had nothing left in her hometown, no family, no job, no chance for a better future. So she decided to continue the journey. Even if she no longer had a groom waiting, as she stepped out of her small rented room, the early morning air greeted her with a chill. Her boots made soft sounds on the stone road as she walked toward the train station. She carried only one bag with her clothes and a few things that held emotional value. Everything else had already been sold. Her heart carried both fear and a strange kind of hope. Hope that something better might be waiting for her somewhere she had never been. When she reached the station, steam from the waiting train rose into the air, and passengers hurried around with luggage in hand. Maria stood still for a moment, feeling small against the large world moving around her. She took a slow breath, boarded the train, found a seat near the window. As the train began to move, she watched her hometown slowly shrink and fade into the distance. Old memories passed before her eyes, people whispering behind her back, shopkeepers offering pitying smiles, children laughing at her size. She had spent her whole life feeling like an outsider in a place she was supposed to call home. Now, she was leaving it, carrying only her strength, her hopes, and a heart bruised but still beating with quiet determination. Hours passed, then more hours. The scenery changed from busy towns to wide open fields, then to hills covered with tall grass. Maria sat silently, looking outside, until an older woman settled beside her. The woman had silver hair tied neatly, kind eyes, and a warm smile that made Maria feel slightly less tense. "You are traveling far?" the woman asked kindly. Maria nodded. "Yes, to the northern mountains." "That is a long journey," the woman said, observing her gently. "You must have an important reason." Maria hesitated. She did not want to reveal the painful truth, but the woman's voice had a softness that invited honesty. "I was supposed to marry someone," Maria said quietly, "but he changed his mind. Because of my size." The older woman listened carefully, her eyes full of compassion. "Ah, my dear," she replied softly, "the world can be unkind to those who look different. But sometimes rejection is life's way of pushing you toward something better. A new beginning. A new blessing." "Ah!" Maria felt her eyes sting slightly. The woman's words were simple, but they touched her deeply. "I hope so," Maria whispered. The woman gently placed her hand on Maria's. "You seem strong. Life will not break someone like you." Maria looked out the window again, but now her heart felt a little lighter. She did not feel as alone as before. The woman stayed beside her for many hours, talking about simple things, weather, travel, families, hopes. When she eventually got off at a different station, she left Maria with a final message. You deserve someone who sees your worth without you having to prove anything. The train continued its long journey. Days turned into nights, and Maria's thoughts drifted between uncertainty and courage. She did not know what awaited her in the north, but she felt a rising belief that it had to be better than the life she left behind after 2 days of travel. The train finally reached the logging town she had read about. Maria stepped off the train and inhaled the fresh mountain air. It was cold, sharp, and clean, nothing like the dusty air of her old town. Tall pine trees surrounded the railway station, their thick branches casting long shadows. The mountains stood proudly in the distance, their peaks dusted with snow, even though it was not winter yet. The town was small but lively. Loggers walked with heavy boots and strong steps, carrying tools on their shoulders. Women moved between the shops, talking and smiling cheerfully. Children played near the wooden houses. Everything looked different from what she had imagined. Yet somehow Maria held her bag tightly and took her first steps into her new world. She needed a place to stay, so she went to a small inn run by an older couple. They looked at her with gentle curiosity, but did not make any rude comments. The wife simply said, "You must be tired. Come inside and warm yourself." The kindness surprised Maria, and she felt herself relax slightly. After resting for a short while, Maria walked out to explore the town. She needed work, food, and a plan. She passed by a diner with big windows and a warm glow inside. The smell of fresh bread drifted out, making her stomach growl softly. She entered the diner, and a middle-aged woman behind the counter greeted her with a friendly smile. "Looking for a meal?" The woman asked. Maria nodded, embarrassed. "Yes, but I also need work. I'm new here." The woman tilted her head thoughtfully. "We sometimes need help washing dishes and carrying supplies. Are you strong enough for that?" Maria gave a small smile for the first time in days. "Yes, very strong." "Well then," the woman replied, smiling back, "you're hired if you can start today." Maria almost could not believe it. In her hometown, people rarely trusted her with anything. Here, a woman was offering her work within minutes of meeting her. She accepted gratefully and began working immediately. She washed dishes, wiped tables, swept floors, and helped carry heavy boxes into the kitchen. She worked with quiet determination, grateful for the chance by evening. Her arms were tired, her feet ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. She walked back to the inn through the cool night air, listening to the wind rustling through the pine trees. The sky above was full of stars, brighter than she had ever seen, for the first time in many years. She felt that maybe, just maybe, this place could become her home. Yet she had no idea that this town held something even more unexpected, a future she had never dreamed of. Someone who would look at her not with judgment but with admiration. Someone who would see her heart before her appearance. She did not know it yet. But the day she arrived in this town was the first step toward meeting the person who would change her life. She went to bed that night, tired but peaceful. Her journey had been painful, but she had taken it with courage. And far away, deep in the forest, a quiet lumberjack named Ethan was ending his own long day, unaware that the woman he would one day love had already arrived in his world. Maria woke up early the next morning, long before the sunlight touched the tops of the tall pine trees outside her window. Her body felt tired from the long journey and the hours she had worked at the diner, but her spirit felt strangely fresh. It was the first time in a long while that she wasn't waking up to sadness. She had work. She had a safe place to sleep. She had a town that did not treat her as a burden the moment she stepped in. She washed up, tied her hair neatly, and put on the cleanest clothes she had. Before heading out, she took a moment to look at her reflection in the small mirror. She saw the same face she had always seen, round cheeks, soft features, and a body much bigger than most women. But today, she felt a quiet strength behind her eyes. For once, she did not feel ashamed of the reflection looking back at her. When she reached the diner, it was still early. The owner, Mrs. Keller, was already inside kneading dough with skilled hands. She looked up and greeted Maria with a friendly smile. "You came early," she said warmly. "I wanted to be useful," Maria replied shyly. Mrs. Keller nodded. That spirit will take you far in this town. Maria started heating water, preparing coffee, and arranging the tables. As she moved around the diner, wiping down the wooden surfaces, she noticed the calmness of the morning. It felt peaceful, like the beginning of something good, around mid-morning. When the loggers began entering the town from the forest, the diner grew busy. The men walked in groups, talking loudly, laughing, and ordering breakfast before heading back to work. Maria moved between tables with a soft smile, refilling cups and carrying plates. And that was when she saw him. A tall figure entered the diner, his boots covered in dust from the forest path. His clothes were simple, thick flannel shirt, worn trousers, and gloves tucked into his belt. He had a strong build, like someone who spent years lifting heavy logs and working with the earth. His hair was dark and slightly messy, and his beard was short but rugged. But what caught Maria's attention the most were his eyes, warm, steady, and observant. This was Ethan, the lumberjack others often talked about. He stood quietly near the counter, waiting his turn. Unlike the other men who joked loudly, Ethan seemed calm and reserved. He looked around the diner, and his gaze paused when he saw Maria carrying a tray of dishes. It wasn't a long stare, but something gentle passed through his eyes, something Maria was not used to seeing. Respect. She tried to look away quickly, afraid he might think she was staring, but it was too late. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Instead of the usual judgment or amusement she got from strangers, Ethan offered her a small, polite nod. It startled her in the best way. Mrs. Keller called out, "Ethan, your usual?" Ethan nodded again. "Yes, thank you." He took a seat at an empty table near the window. Maria continued her work, trying not to think too much about him, but she could not help it. There was something different about him. He did not stare at her body or give her strange looks. In fact, he seemed to look at everyone the same way with quiet calmness. When she finally approached his table with his food, she placed the plate gently before him. "Your breakfast?" she said softly. Ethan looked up at her, his voice deep but kind. "Thank you." Maria nodded quickly and stepped away, feeling her heart beat slightly faster than normal. She did not understand why. It wasn't because she liked him, not yet. It was because he treated her the way she had always wished people would treat her. During the day, Ethan came and left without much fuss. But Maria noticed that he always looked at her before leaving, as if acknowledging her presence quietly. Respectfully, without making her uncomfortable, days passed, and Maria settled into her work routine. She cleaned tables, helped with cooking, served customers, and learned the rhythms of the diner. She still felt lonely sometimes, but it was a different kind of loneliness, now one softened by hope, and Ethan kept coming. Every morning, he walked into the diner, ordered his usual, and sat in the same spot. He wasn't talkative, but he always greeted her politely. Sometimes he asked simple questions. "How is your morning? You getting enough rest? Is the work too heavy?" Maria answered briefly, still unsure how to handle such kindness. She had never known a man who spoke to her without judgment or sarcasm. One evening, as the sun was setting and the diner was almost empty, Maria was carrying a heavy box of supplies to the storage room. The box slipped slightly in her hands, and she struggled to find her balance. Before she could drop it, someone's strong hand steadied the box from the other side. She looked up and found Ethan standing there. "You shouldn't carry this alone," he said simply. "It's heavy." Maria's face warmed. "I can manage. I'm strong." "I know you are," Ethan replied. His voice wasn't mocking. It was admiring. "But you don't always have to do everything by yourself." He lifted the box with ease and set it down inside the storage room. Maria followed him, feeling a little unsure. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're welcome," he replied, brushing dust off his hands. For a moment, they stood there in the soft light, neither of them speaking. The silence felt calm, not awkward. Ethan glanced around the room, then looked at her again. "You're new here," said gently, more like a statement than a question. "Yes," Maria replied. "I came a few days ago. This town is a good place. People work hard, but they're kind. You'll do well here." Maria smiled a little. "I hope so." He looked at her thoughtfully. You already are. And with that, he left the storage room, heading out the diner door and into the soft evening light. Maria stood there for a long moment, letting his words settle in her heart. She didn't know why his simple kindness affected her so much. Maybe it was because she wasn't used to being seen in a positive light. Maybe it was because Ethan looked at her like she was a person, not a problem, not a joke, not a burden. That night, Mrs. Keller noticed Maria's thoughtful expression. Long day? She asked. A little Maria replied. Mrs. Keller smiled knowingly. Ethan helped you, didn't he? He's a good man. Quiet, but good. He's kind. He's also very lonely, Mrs. Keller said softly. He works deep in the woods most days. Lives alone. Doesn't talk much, but he has a gentle heart. Maria listened carefully, feeling something warm stir inside her. She didn't know what it was, but it wasn't romantic love, not yet. It was something simpler, something like hope for a genuine human connection. The next morning, Ethan came again. This time, when he sat down, he gave Maria a small smile. Not a big one. Just enough to make her heart flutter a little. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she replied, trying not to sound nervous. How are you today? He asked. Better than before, she answered honestly. That's good, Ethan said. As the days turned into weeks, they talked a little more each time. Not about deep secrets or heavy topics, but simple, everyday things. Ethan told her about the forest, the tall trees, the sound of rivers, the quiet spaces where he went to think. He talked about his work, how he learned to cut logs safely, how he repaired tools, how he guided younger workers. Maria listened with interest, finding his world both peaceful and strong. In return, Maria told him small things about her past, not the painful parts, just the gentle memories. Baking bread with her grandmother, feeding the chickens, reading in the sunlight. She didn't mention the rejection she had faced all her life, but Ethan could sense that she had experienced hurt. Still, he never pushed her to explain. One rainy afternoon, when the diner was almost empty, Ethan stayed longer than usual. He watched the rain through the window and asked, Do you miss home? Maria looked down. There wasn't much to miss. He nodded slowly, understanding more than her words revealed. Sometimes leaving is the bravest choice. She smiled sadly. It didn't feel brave, she replied. You came here alone. That takes courage. Their eyes met again, and something unspoken passed between them, something gentle, warm, and new. Over time, Maria noticed that Ethan always seemed to treat her with extra care. He held doors open for her, helped her lift boxes, offered her an umbrella when it rained, and sometimes waited outside the diner just to make sure she walked safely back to her inn. People in the town noticed too. They smiled, whispered, and exchanged knowing glances, but nobody teased. In this quiet mountain town, people respected feelings that grew naturally. Maria didn't fully understand what she felt yet. She admired Ethan, respected him, and felt safe around him. He was different from every man she had ever known, gentle, thoughtful, steady, and Ethan. Ethan found himself looking forward to seeing her every morning more than anything else in his day. Neither of them knew it clearly yet, but something quietly beautiful had begun to grow between them, something that would soon change both their lives. Maria had now spent several weeks in the mountain town, and the once unfamiliar streets had slowly begun to feel like home. She had learned which path the school children took each morning. Shopkeepers opened first, and which neighbors liked to talk about the weather even on days it didn't change. Her heart felt lighter, her steps more confident, and her days more peaceful than she had ever imagined possible. And a large part of that peace came from the quiet presence of Ethan. Every morning, without fail, he came to the diner. At first, he stayed only long enough to eat, but as time passed, he stayed longer and talked more. He enjoyed listening to Maria's soft laughter, and she liked hearing his thoughtful voice. They still weren't sure what this connection meant, but each moment they spent together added something warm to their days. Maria didn't dare believe that someone like Ethan could ever see her as more than a friend. She admired him deeply, his strength, his kindness, his calm nature, but she never let herself imagine anything beyond that. She had been hurt too many times. She did not want to read something wrong in his actions and embarrass herself. But Ethan saw her differently than she realized. One morning, after he finished his breakfast, he stood near the counter while Maria washed dishes. The sunlight from the window made dust particles sparkle in the air. Maria was humming softly, unaware that Ethan had been watching her with quiet admiration. "You seem happy today," he said gently. Maria looked up, surprised but smiling. "I think I'm finally settling in." "I can see that," he replied. "You look more comfortable. More at peace." She paused, feeling a warmth spread in her chest. "This place is kind. People here treat me well." Ethan nodded slowly, choosing his words carefully. "You deserve that." Maria looked down at the soapy water, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. Compliments were not something she received often, and whenever she did, they felt almost too heavy to hold. Just then, Mrs. Keller called out from the kitchen, "Maria, dear, there's someone asking for you." Maria wiped her hands and walked to the front door. The moment she saw the man standing there, her breath caught. It was the schoolteacher, the man who had rejected her as a mail-order bride. He looked nervous. His hat clutched tightly in his hands. He took a hesitant step forward. "Maria," he began, clearing his throat, "I came to speak with you." "May I?" Maria felt a shock run through her. She had not expected to ever see him again. She nodded stiffly, unsure what to say. Ethan, standing near the counter, tensed when he recognized the stranger. He didn't know the full story yet, but he sensed something wrong. The schoolteacher continued, "I made a terrible mistake. I judged you without meeting you. I want to make things right." Maria looked straight into his eyes. Her voice was calm but firm. "You rejected me. You never even gave me a chance to show who I am." The man swallowed hard. "I was foolish. But seeing you now, how respected you are in this town, I realize I acted unfairly. If you are still willing, I would like to renew the marriage offer." Deep stillness filled the diner. Even the customers fell silent, watching the scene unfold. Maria stood frozen. Part of her felt old pain rising again. Another part felt something entirely new, strength. Before she could respond, Ethan quietly stepped forward and stood beside her, not touching her, not interrupting. Just standing with her, Maria felt his presence like a shield of calm. She turned back to the schoolteacher. "I'm not angry at you," she said slowly, "but I don't want a marriage based on guilt or second thoughts. I want someone who sees me with respect from the beginning, someone who values my heart." The man nodded sadly, realizing his mistake was too big to undo. "I understand," he whispered, lowering his head. Maria took a slow breath. "I hope you find someone who suits you. But that person isn't me." The schoolteacher looked around the diner one last time, then walked out quietly, disappearing into the bright morning light. For a moment, silence remained. Maria felt her heart thumping, unsure if she had done the right thing. But when she looked up and saw Ethan's gentle expression, she knew. "You were brave," Ethan said softly. Maria shook her head. "I was just honest." "That takes bravery too," he replied. Something in his voice made her heart flutter. She realized then that Ethan had stepped forward not because of anger, but because he wanted her to feel supported. He respected her enough to stand beside her, but not speak for her. That level of care, she had never experienced it before. The rest of the day passed quietly, but something had changed between them, something unspoken but powerful. Later that evening, when Maria finished her shift, Ethan was waiting outside the diner. The sky was painted orange and pink, the mountains glowing softly in the distance. "Can I walk you to your inn?" he asked. Maria felt her cheeks warm. "If you want to." They walked together along the dirt path. The smell of fresh pine filled the air, and the wind gently rustled the branches above them. For a while neither spoke. The silence was peaceful. Finally Ethan said, "I didn't like how that man talked to you." Maria smiled sadly. "He didn't mean to hurt me, but his words reminded me of old wounds." Ethan looked at her, his voice quiet but steady. Anyone who rejects you because of your size doesn't deserve to walk beside you. Maria's steps slowed. He continued, I've seen the way you work, the way you stay kind, even when life hasn't been kind to you. You're strong, hardworking, and you treat everyone with respect. That matters more than anything else. Maria felt her throat tighten. She had spent her entire life waiting for someone to see her true worth. She never imagined it would be a quiet lumberjack in a mountain town. Why are you saying this? She whispered. Ethan stopped walking. The fading sunlight touched his face, making his eyes look warm and gentle. Because it's the truth, he said. And because I want you to know what I feel. Maria's heart raced. She waited, barely breathing. Ethan took a small breath. I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I look forward to seeing you every day. Your presence makes the world feel less heavy. Maria didn't speak. She was afraid her voice would break. I don't want to frighten you, Ethan added softly. I just want you to know that if you choose me, I will always treat you with respect, and I will always be grateful for the chance. Tears filled Maria's eyes, not from sadness, but from relief, from disbelief, from a happiness she never expected to feel. She looked at him through shimmering eyes. Ethan, no one has ever spoken to me like that. He stepped closer, still respectful, still careful. I mean every word. Maria took a shaky breath, then another. And then, with a courage she never knew she had, she said, I care about you too. A soft smile touched Ethan's lips, gentle, grateful, hopeful. The walk continued, but now their steps felt connected. Their silence felt full of meaning. When they reached the inn, neither wanted the moment to end. Will I see you tomorrow? Maria asked softly. Ethan nodded with a warm smile. Every morning, as long as you want me to come. She smiled back. I want that. Days turned into weeks again, and their bond grew stronger. They spent more time together walking the forest trails, sharing meals, talking about life. Ethan showed her the peaceful places in the woods where the sunlight touched the ground in golden patches. Maria shared stories she had never told anyone, trusting him completely. The townspeople began smiling knowingly whenever they saw the two together. Their relationship grew slowly, naturally, without rush, and then one evening, months later, Ethan asked Maria to walk with him to a quiet clearing in the forester place, where the trees formed a natural arch and the ground was covered in soft moss. He took her hands gently in his. Maria, he said softly, you brought light into my life. You made my days warmer. You made my home feel less empty. I want to build a future with you. If you want that too? Maria's heart felt full, overflowing with a gratitude she could barely describe. Yes, she whispered. I want that. They married in a simple ceremony near the forest edge. The townspeople gathered, smiling warmly, while sunlight filtered through the tall trees. Ethan stood proudly beside her, and Maria felt something she had never felt before, truly seen. Deeply valued, finally loved, in that quiet mountain town. She found not just a husband but a home, a future, and a life built on respect and kindness. And every time she looked at Ethan, she remembered something the old woman on the train had told her, sometimes rejection leads you exactly where you are meant to be. For Maria, that was the truest story of her life.